Welcome back to the HitLab Academy, folks, and today we are looking at marking up the drum kit. I've received a bunch of mails and DMs from you guys asking for this video. What marks do I use when I record a drum kit in the studio? So that is what we're gonna get into today. Stick around, let's get into it. Alright, so marking up the drum kit. This marking setup that I'm going to show you guys today is pretty standard in the HitLab. It is my go-to setup for most things. I do tend to add a bunch of marks here and there to the setup to change the sound a bit or reduce the marks depending on what I'm going for. So in this case, I'm basically just showing you guys my standard go-to marking technique and microphones that I use. I'm sure in videos in the future, I'll break it down and give you guys more examples of slightly more stripped down setups and even more extravagant setups where I have more microphones in the kit, like random little kit marks down here or up here or above my head. But for the sake of this video, we're gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna show you guys the standard marking setup that I use at the HitLab almost every day when I'm recording drums. I record a lot of drums in this very room. Okay, so let's start with the snare drum. The snare drum I use on top a standard SM57, which has been a little bit modified. So it's not quite standard. As you can see there, it's been modified quite a bit and it's got a weird L shape to it, and that is basically to enhance the rejection of the hi-hat. I'll make a video explaining what I've done with this SM57 in the future, but it might be a bit long-hauled for this video right now. Then usually I have an SM57 on the snare bottom as well for the snappy, but I happened to lend that extra SM57 to one of my buddies recently. Then I sort of experimented while making this video with some new marks that I could try on my snare bottom, and I ended up settling with the Shure SM7B. Basically what I do with that is I put it directly below the snare top microphone so that the two capsules are facing each other directly, and then I invert the phase of the bottom one because you will have phase issues with that configuration. So the next thing is my tom microphones. I've got a set of Sennheiser 421s which I use, and I place them about 4 fingers off the skin of the drum, facing relatively close to the center of the drum because I'm trying to capture as much of the full tom sound as possible. And the reason why I put 4 fingers between the capsule of the microphone and the actual skin of the drum is to allow time for the resonance of the tom to actually get to the capsule, and that's what gives me a slightly cleaner and better tom sound. At the moment, the skins that are on the toms are quite old, and the snare as well. I normally do change them up before I record drums and stuff, but for the sake of this video, they are slightly old and they've got a bit of a vintage sound, shall we say. Alright, the next thing I like to do is I like to spot mark my cymbals. So on my 2 crashes, my left and my right, I've got a set of 414 AKGs, which I've distanced perfectly from the center of the snare. So both microphones are perfectly from the center of the snare in order to make sure that when I solo that overhead channel, which is a stereo channel in Logic, you getting the snare in the center of your pan, and one will be left, one will be right. And I feel that it works better for the stereo spread to distance them perfectly. And how I do that is I use a tape measure, and I make sure that the capsule of the microphone to the center of the snare drum is exactly correct. And then on my right cymbal, I use a slightly different mic. I use the Earthworks TC25, which is a really nice microphone. It actually captures quite a bit of frequency. You get quite a bit of low end, which is beautiful for a ride cymbal, because a ride, in my opinion, isn't too fluffy and bright like normal cymbals. I like to keep it darker, and I like to have a bit of control with my lower mid frequency. So that's why I like to use the Earthworks TC25 on the ride cymbal. The next thing is my kick drum. On my kick out, which is placed in the hole of the kick for a nice low end thump, I use the RE20, which is really awesome. I love that microphone for so many uses. It's used on so many instruments in the studio. I absolutely love it. So it gives me a nice thump out of the kick drum. And then on the inside, I've got a Shure Beta 91, just to make sure that I get that snap and that click out of the kick that I need. So the RE20 gives us the thump, and the Beta 91 gives us the click and the snap on the inside. Then this is a fairly big room, so what I've done is I've placed 2 room microphones. I've got one over there and one over there, and these room microphones are about 3 meters away from the kit because the room isn't all that big. The room is about 6 meters in depth, so I utilize about half of that space. So I place these room mics about 3 meters away from the kick, and I keep them fairly low to the ground to ensure that my room sound still has a lot of low end to it. I find if I lift the room mics all the way up to the roof, it gets thinner, and I don't particularly end up using them then. I like to use the room mics for hard compression and thump. That is my objective when I use room mics with a drum recording. Right, I think I've touched on everything for now. This is my basic drum kit setup, my basic miking setup. Like I mentioned earlier, it does change. Sometimes I use 3 mics or 5 mics or 10 mics, and sometimes 16 mics. It all depends on the song we're recording. But this is a fail-safe drum recording setup, and I use it all the time with all sorts of sessions, sounds, songs, artists, and it always works and gives me the result that I'm happy with at the end of the day. Okay, well, maybe we should go and record some drums, and then we can head on over to the control room and solo these channels and have a listen to each individual signal and see what they sound like. I'm using Apollo conversion. I use the Apollo 16, and I'm running a combination of Neve 1073s, Neve 88Rs, APIs, Chandlers, and Universal Audio preamps. I've got 4 1073s that are being used on the kit. I've got 4 APIs, and I've got 4 88R Neves on this specific setup. But I will link in the description below each microphone and the preamp that it went through, so you guys can go check that out. I've done no pre-processing, no EQ, no compression going in, which I normally do, but for the sake of this video, I wanted to just keep it simple drum kit miking. That is the objective of the video, how to mic up a drum kit. So let's go and record some drums, and then we can go and solo some channels and have a listen. Alright guys, yeah, we are inside the control room. Just a reminder, this is not a drum mixing video. This is a video showcasing the microphone choices, where I place them, what preamps I go through, and how I hear them back in the DAW. Okay, so let's head into the DAW and solo some tracks here and have a listen to these drum mics. Okay, so let's start off by listening to the whole kit with everything open, from a little bit of the pre-chorus rolling into the chorus, just so that we can hear all the elements of the drum kit. That's a really nice, clean, workable drum sound. I didn't do any pre-processing going in because I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. Drum kit, microphone, preamp, converter, DAW. All right, let's solo the kick in. Now the kick in was a Shure Beta 91 and it went through a Chandler 500 series germ preamp. Let's have a listen to that. It should be clicky with lots of high-end information. And as you can hear, it is just that. There's a hell of a lot of click and high-end information going there. Next up is the RE20 on the whole, which was going through a Neve 1073. This microphone should give us a lot more thump, a lot more depth, lower frequencies, and a fuller sound. And then the combination of the two will give us a beautiful, punchy kick drum sound. So you can hear that there's a lot more low-end information. So if I combine the two, we've got a beautiful kick drum sound. We have enough low-end information and we have enough high-end information. All right, let's move on to the snare. SM57 through a Chandler 500 series germ preamp with, it's the slightly modded SM57 to reduce the hi-hat bleed. So let's have a listen to that. And as you can hear, very minimal hi-hat bleed and a nice clean snare drum sound that will be easy to work with in post-production. All right, now our experimental microphone, the Shure 7B on the snare bottom. Naturally, I would use an SM57, but after trying this Shure 7B for this video, I think I'm going to be using a Shure 7B going forward. Let's have a listen to it. It's nice and snappy, and if you include that with the top snare, we have a really nice, clean snare drum sound that will be easy to process afterwards. All right, onto the toms. Let's move on over to where I played my rack tom. Over here at the end of the song, let's have a listen to it. 4 fingers off the skin of the drum. It was the Sennheiser. Let's have a listen. That's a really clean high tom sound. I really dig it. Now, moving on to the lower floor tom in the verse. Let's have a listen. Same story. 4 fingers off the drum, facing the mic to the center of the drum in order to enhance that resonance and hear the full tone of the actual drum kit and the shell. That's a really nice, clean floor tom sound. Let's have a listen one more time. That's killer. I really like it. All right, onto the hi-hats. With the hi-hats, I used the AKG C451B microphone. It is my favorite microphone for recording hats. The hats were the Sabian HHX hi-hats, 14-inch. They are incredibly dark, but I like dark hats because you can, with the flick of an EQ just like that, make them bright should you need that bright hi-hat sound, which I'm not a huge fan of. I use it sometimes, but not all the time. So I'm going to bypass this EQ over there, and I'm going to play it with just the clean feed coming in. These hi-hats were recorded through an 88R preamp through Apollo conversion. Let's have a listen. And should you want more brightness, just open up the EQ, apply something like that, and have a listen. That's a lot brighter. All right, I always find that if you have bright hi-hats, it's very difficult to make them dark or thicker or just darker in pitch and tone. But if you have a dark sounding hi-hat, to get that hi-hat to sound like a higher pitched hi-hat, it's much easier. So that's why I like to record darker hi-hats. All right, onto the ride. The ride cymbal, once again, like I explained, I like to keep the full frequency spectrum with my recordings because I think it just enhances the general sound of the drum kit by keeping those lower mid frequencies in the ride cymbal. It just adds more size and feel to the drum kit. So let's have a listen to that. Once again, you can always thin that ride out by simply applying a high pass filter and bumping with the shelf at the top just a little bit. But we bypassed that right now. Let's have a listen to the raw natural ride sound that we recorded. And if you want that thinner, slightly more, for a lack of better examples, gospel sounding ride cymbal, apply a high pass filter and shelf the highs a bit, and here we go. So yeah, as you can hear, it's really cool. It's very versatile. That Earthworks TC25 microphone is incredibly versatile. Right, let's have a listen to the two 414 overheads, which were essentially spot mics, but I made sure that the distance from the snare to each capsule was exactly the same in order to have the snare sit in the middle of the mix if I solo the stereo channel. This was recorded in stereo, so if I open that up, you can see the two channels over there. Right, let's have a listen to these overheads soloed. That is a really nice overhead sound. I love 414s on that. And 414s, these 414s went through APIs, also 500 series APIs, and through Apollo conversion directly in, no pre-processing. Let's move on to the room mics. Now the room mics are of my favorite, but I don't use them very often because they can get a little bit out of control, which is awesome, and that's why I like them. But these room mics were recorded on the Warm Audio 47 Juniors through API 500 series preamps. Let's have a listen to them on their own. That's really awesome. I think it's really cool. And if I play the full drum kit back and I mute and unmute those room mics, you're gonna have a listen and hear for yourself the difference it makes to record room mics when tracking drums. It just simply adds size, width, depth, feel, everything to the drum sound. So I'm gonna play this back now with everything open and I'm gonna mute and unmute the room mics so you can hear the difference they add to the mix. So as you can hear, it adds a huge difference to the sound of your drum kit, and room mics allow you a bit of flexibility regarding the drum sound that you want to go for. You can get really big thumpy drum sounds or even tight sounds by bringing the rooms right down. It depends on what you enjoy listening to when mixing drums and the type of music that you will be working on. Well folks, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you haven't yet, please head on over to our channel, subscribe, ring the little bell for instant notifications, and leave us a comment below this video or a thumbs up or a thumbs down depending on how you felt it went. Guys, I love you all. I hope you have a fantastic week and I look forward to making more of these videos for you. I'll see you next time. Peace.